4 sessions, 4 podcasts. This is the 4th one since the retreat. I've done a hot bay with each guest. And I had Corey on. She's a combo practitioner. And I noticed like with her as well as others, just that clearing, I've seen that, and like I've seen other people do that. It does feel, that's like something that came up for you, right? When you were in the ceremony. That just kind of came naturally to you.
Yeah. I mean, when you're in the medicine, it heightens your senses around like the flow of energy and your sensitivity to energy. And so, yeah, I've never done that before. I mean, I've sat with psilocybin several times, and but there was something about that experience that was like driving, circulating energy through me, and that. Yeah, it's like 3 to 5 of those like little out breaths that felt there's something I don't know, calming or therapeutic about it. It felt like it was just
Clearing.
Yeah, clearing something.
Yeah, I started doing that as well, especially when I was doing hop A. But yeah, during that entire retreat, it felt like, you're kind of just clearing out whatever you need to clear out. And it just, even if you don't realize exactly what it's doing, it's like,
there's
expending
dimensions of energy and intelligence inside of us that I think we're not consciously aware of. So much energy.
Yeah.
Between environmental influences, your past, conversations that you have with people, energy that you take on. I think I probably take on a tremendous amount of energy from the line of work that I'm in, and I'm on like, anywhere from 15 to 30 coaching calls a week, with people. And so, there was a lot of movement of energy from that ceremony. I mean, the third night was like unlike anything I've ever experienced.
Yeah.
And what was interesting is like, I've done psilocybin several times, and I'm like, okay, you go into the experience, and I'm like, when it comes in, I'm like, okay, I've been here before. This is the other side. You kind of tap into it. And there was that underlying thread with ayahuasca as well, but each experience was, in terms of like the journey that it led me on, was very different. It had its own energy. And the third night, man, that second cup hit me like I did 4 cups, And I think, who knows exactly why, but maybe because we did the sweat lodge the night before or the day before. So I was like absolutely cleared, energetically, but the power of that second cup, man. I mean, I was cocooned under my blanket, just totally covered. And my whole body was like shaking and convulsing and vibrating. And when my eyes were closed, it was complete. I mean, open your eyes, you're here, you're present. Closed eyes, instantly, like in another dimension with full clear, landscapes and entities all around me.
Yeah, and you were also like moving your body a lot too.
Yeah.
I remember one of the guys next to you, was it Kyle, I think?
Yeah.
He was just like, dude, I saw you already moving the whole night. It's like, what is he doing? But you were just like, it's another form of clearing energy for you. Because I'm usually pretty still. Like physically, I'm like almost laying on my back and very still. But there are moments where I do like move my body a little bit. Just to, if it gets like overwhelming, you just like, okay, tap back into your body. Because yeah, when you do close your eyes, there are multiple moments, it's very powerful, and it can be like, whoa, this is a lot.
Yeah, third night was a lot. Like I was like, at several points throughout, I was like, could I do a third cup? I probably could, but like, how much deeper would this go?
Yeah.
I think if I were to hit a third cup, it would be complete dissolution of like being here and would just be full in another dimension, another space. And I'm like, maybe on the next retreat.
So you didn't do 3 cups or?
No, all 3 nights I did 2.
Okay. Same. There were, I think the second night, there was a couple times where I thought about doing a third. And there's a saying, if you can hear the call, you should take another cup. Did I could hear
is that a saying?
I guess, yeah. I've heard it a couple times from different people.
Jeez.
Maybe like once or twice. But it's like, yeah, if you can hear it, you can hear people or the shaman or whoever's conducting the ceremony. And they say, yeah, if you like another cup and you're there and you're able to like get up. And what's interesting too with the flow, the current of the medicine, whatever's flowing spiritually within that circle, it can get so intense, but then the music stops and then they say, okay, we're going to serve another cup. Sometimes it mellows down and allows you to like just kind of tap back in and be like, oh, okay, I might be able to actually take this. I only took 2, all 3 nights, but there was a couple times where I felt like I was debating on it, but once they stopped serving that third cup, and they got back into the music, it was just like, wow, it was still powerful. Like I don't think I needed it, but I don't know.
Yeah,
interesting.
On the third day, I mean, I probably was like deep in it, like peaking, probably half an hour before they asked for the third cup. And at that point, I couldn't even get up. Like I couldn't move. I was just in a cocoon.
Yeah.
And what was like interesting is like one of the things I was thinking about in the experience is like, it's insane how much sensory overload there is. Like right now, or in normal waking consciousness, I would say like sensory, the amount of like load coming in between our 5 senses, energetically, visually, sound is like, I don't know, a 3 out of 10. In that experience on that third night, it was like 30 out of 10. Just for like 2.5 hours, just like, and like, how do you even put words to that? How do you conceptually articulate what that even means?
Yeah.
It was profound, man. Profound.
Yeah. I mean, all ceremonies were powerful. The third one was very powerful as well. The first night was, overwhelming. And it also felt like a 30 out of 10. And, there was like no doubt in my mind after, because like I did the first cup of the first ceremony and I could start to feel the essence of the medicine, but it wasn't that like, it didn't hit. But as we were getting up for the second cup, first person that got up actually was, I think, Alex Kremer. And he got up immediately, but they had to like wait a second to like get things ready. So he was like already at the altar, like ready to go, but he had to wait. And I got up too. And I was like behind him in the center of the temple, just waiting.
Oh, yeah.
And as I was waiting, I was like, oh, it's starting to hit me.
Yeah.
The first cup started to hit me more and more. I was like, whoa, okay. And so then took the second one and went back and Yeah, you can't really conceptualize it. And I've noted a couple times and with you before that the author of Liquid Light, he very eloquently articulates it, but he even notes that doesn't do it justice. Like it's still, it's pretty difficult to put into words what's actually going on. But I think he did it pretty well already. Like you mentioned, ordinary consciousness, like what we're experiencing right now, and then you've got your five senses, and the medicine does. I mean, you're feeling it flow through you. Physically, you're hearing the music. And then when you close your eyes, it's like you're in a different realm. You're in a different dimension. You're like just in some other form of like higher consciousness, and that higher consciousness and the the geometric patterns and the visionary sequences that you're going through, they're just like so powerful. And for me, what I noticed was it could be so powerful that I could not, like if I tried, I could not, if I opened my eyes or if I tried to like get up and move, it was like, no.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think I've expressed it before that my nervous system would just be like, shut your eyes, stay still, and just tap into the stillness and just the present moment. And the more that you're in the present moment and you're not grappling with like trying to get out of it, the deeper you go.
Mm.
And yeah, you mentioned doing like a macro dose of psilocybin. I did 3 pretty big doses 3 separate times in my life, but they were all when I was pretty young, like teenager. Maybe I was like 20. But the set and setting were not even remotely close to what we were in, right? It was just like we were in the woods, and like, or we were in my buddy's backyard or my buddy's basement, and you're young and you don't have any context.
Right, no context.
So I'm curious, like, is there a contrasting difference for you between
the two?
Yeah, I'm sure there is, but
Yeah. I think one differentiator would be like ayahuasca carries a feminine energy while psilocybin seems to have more of a masculine energy to it. What was interesting is like, going into ayahuasca, I thought the way that it adjusted and shifted my like sensory apparatuses, like my visuals, auditory, like feel like I thought it was going to be a totally different alien experience. But as it started to come on, it felt very familiar. I was like, oh, I've kind of been here before. And like the best way I could describe it, because psychedelics take you, out of such ordinary states of consciousness. I was like, okay, the only way I could kind of describe it would be kind of like mushrooms. But what I noticed with ayahuasca was that it had an underlying permeation of being more gentle, I think. And just the overwhelming amount of like the current of ayahuasca for me was just overwhelming levels of love, kindness, compassion, and gratitude. Like, I feel those things from time to time on a regular basis, but the way it infuses that vibration into every molecule and cell is really profound. It's like, I'm sure you can experience it through meditation and yoga over, really long periods of time as you begin to really dig deep into those practices. But, within, especially that first night, man, that first night felt like I connected to the ancestors of the earth, the underlying permeating, animating source of intelligence that is the thread between every aspect of reality, as above, so below. It's just one singular energy vibrating at different frequencies and expressing itself in different forms, but it's all one. And I was able to fully experience that. Where I don't think I ever experienced that on psilocybin. Psilocybin for me was very strong, like visuals and like the melting of sort of reality, but then would also take me deep in like emotional processing and things like that as well. But yeah, hard to say. They both kind of have their own sort of energy and spirit to them. They've both been, I mean, absolutely profound on my journey.
Yeah. Yeah. We've kind of briefly spoken about like the weeks after, and for context for listeners, at this point they'll be listening to an episode of with Billy. So Billy was with us on the retreat together, and this took place beginning of October from like the 2nd to the 8th. So it's been about 3 weeks now since then, and yeah, a lot to take away from it. It's almost, there's something I've heard, like the human brain only has a finite amount of capacity to remember everything you go through, and with the medicine, you're not going to remember everything that you experience, but you can, and the good stuff sticks, at least, or the more impactful parts of the process stick. And yeah, I would love for you to share. I know you kind of already off the mic shared a little bit, but like really, what did you integrate from this experience? Because when I met you and we were in the same camper, so me, you, and Julian, I was honored to be camping with two very wise individuals. We're all, I think, in our 30s, and just very impressed with like how, like for this age, how in tune with yourself you are. Like I got a glimpse of that just from the calls that we did on Zoom. And so to me, it seems like you've been on this path for a while, this self-improvement, this clarification of your true nature. And so it wasn't like, because some people go into these medicine works and they're not really that far along. They kind of just think like, this is going to fix me or something like that, versus you've been doing the work, it seems, for years. Julian has as well, and I have as well. So from this, the state that you're in your life now, and then immersing into this medicine journey, what were you able to like crystallize and take away from this amazing week?
Yeah. Yeah, the underlying theme and sort of thread of the experience for me was really kindness and gratitude. That first night, if I mean the first night of introduction, the very first experience of ayahuasca was like perfect. There was no, can't imagine it being any better. I know everybody has their own experiences. Some people, it's really difficult their first time. But I probably said thank you throughout that first journey like 250 times over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Felt like it was a remembering. I was reminded of like the truth. And so kindness and gratitude was really I remember I was taking notes and I had my journal and I wrote down kindness plus gratitude equals infinite abundance. Because in those states of energy, there's really an experience of harmony. I think harmony is a really powerful vibration that maybe doesn't get talked about that often. You know, I watch a lot of videos, listen to a lot of podcasts, but the word harmony isn't really thrown around that much, you know? And harmony is, I mean, how do you even describe it? But it's the alignment and sort of symbiosis of energy, where everything is whole and complete and feeding each other. And so, yeah, man, that was really the underlying fabric and thread. That's something I've just continued to stay conscious of, is gratitude and kindness. And another really, really powerful sort of insight was when I was processing, like, because I went into it with some intentions, like, okay, I've got this kind of thing I feel challenged by. I've got this, like, what should I do here? Clarity. And as those things were coming up for me, one thing I realized is if I just infuse enough kindness and gratitude into that, like, energetically, it'll begin to dissolve from like this, whatever it is, into something softer. And the other thing that really became clear to me in this ceremony, especially after all the times I've sat with psilocybin, is that when it comes to our healing, or when it comes to problems in our life, and having a strong understanding of neurolinguistic programming as well really solidifies this, is that basically, like, when we have problems as human beings, it's only a problem because the thing is like right here. Right? So it's big, it's covering our vision, and we can't see around it. So we have one frame of reference and one vantage point in which we're processing that information. Like if you take a three-dimensional cube, for example, right? You've got one side that you're seeing. But if you flip that cube, you're now looking at it from a different angle, and you see it from a different perspective. And because you're able to see it from a different perspective, it allows you to have more insight in the way that you process that data. So, like, what all of these different healing modalities do, whether it's breath work or psilocybin or, you know, MDMA therapy or ayahuasca or whatever it is, right? And even in NLP or in psychotherapy, you know, when you're taking people through these different therapeutic techniques to help people process pain and trauma, what happens is that problem is solidified in the neural networks of our experience, right? In our memory, in the way that we specifically remember something, and then the energy that is imprinted. And what these different therapies allow you to do is, like, if this is the problem right here, it basically takes you right here, right? And then you're able to kind of move around and see that problem. And as a result of being able to see and experience that problem from a different vantage point with new resources, it allows you to reprocess the data, right? Like, problems are only problems in the context of the data that you have. But if you can get more data and you can find the space within yourself to have the openness and flexibility and courage to see that thing that was so challenging, so hard, so painful, so hurtful from a new resourceful state, it'll begin to dissolve what you thought was once a concrete cinder block that just, that's how it is, and it can't be any other way, right? I'm this way and it can't be any other way. This person is this way and it can't be any other way, right? So we get so stuck on certain types of, you know, perspectives, ideologies, and meanings, right? Like, I think one thing a lot of people maybe don't consider in neurolinguistic programming, really, like, is so about this is like understanding like the value of language, right? Like the way that we talk to ourselves, the way that we think, the words that we use to describe something, right? Like if you peel one layer deeper, underlying language, right? What is language? Language is vibration, it's sound coming from this operating system. Like, what is this? What am I? Who am I? How does this thing work? You don't see all your organs and 60,000 miles of blood vessels, like, but somehow we have this ability to using, our throat, right? To breathe air out of this system. And then we agree upon a set of sounds that have a meaning, right? But if you peel one layer of the onion back and don't just look at the language, underneath that is vibration and intention. There's an energetic, like you build it energetically and then it comes out. And then in your tonality, whether it's low or high or, a question or a statement or, and so really just like being mindful of like the language that we use. I don't know how I got onto language, but
that was beautiful.
It's language is very, very important. How you talk to yourself is how reality unfolds, right? You've got, in NLP, they say, the map is not the territory. So the world outside of us, outside the confines of our own skin is the territory. And the qualities of the territory is that it's objective, it's neutral, right? It's just physical matter existing in the universe. It takes a subjective witness with all of your filters and perceptions and preconceived notions and conditioning to project onto the territory your personal map. And so what these medicines really allow you to do is to dig into those experiences where, right, we look at something, this happened to me as a kid. This is how my parents treated me. I never got this, or like, this person screwed me over, like whatever it is, right? And it allows you to reprocess those experiences in a way that allows you to free yourself from being a slave or being victim to one source of perception. And it's super powerful. It's super powerful because through these experiences, what you ultimately discover, especially through long-term meditation, is, what I discovered is that I am the source. I'm the spring. I'm the well from which all of reality emanates and is created from. There is no out there. The world that I think exists out there is a reflection of the energy, the vibration, the thoughts, the perceptions that I hold inside of me. And so like the healing journey is this process of going inside of yourself and identifying what experiences, what memories, what moments, right, are ultimately repressing my most authentic self, my most authentic creative expression. And when you're able to begin to clear out those things that throughout your life, you were holding on to, those stories, those narratives, those meanings, those self-perceptions, those beliefs about other people, you're able to reprocess those and kind of let those things go. What's left is your own authentic energy. And I think the game is really like, as a human being, if you look at like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, sort of, it's like at the end of the day, it's this process of clearing out the things that don't serve you and don't align to your energy, and finding ways to cultivate your own unique, authentic expression. Every person has a unique gift, a unique energetic like fingerprint, right? And it's about being able to clear out the things that are repressing that. At least that's been my experience. You know, growing up in a crazy dysfunctional family, losing my dad to alcohol poisoning when I was 14, and addiction in the family, and just all types of crazy dysfunction. Like, until I got sober, what I was constantly wrestling with was really it was my authentic energy being repressed, not having the confidence to fully be myself, not having the confidence to fully communicate my truth, not having the whatever it was, right? Something wasn't allowing me to completely clear the filter to where if I think about something or feel something, I express it out into the world. And as soon as I quit drinking and started going deeper and deeper into the whole deal, that was the key that unlocked everything. You know?
Yeah.
Being able to tap into your innate internal gifts, whatever those are, to be able to share them with the world, I think is I don't know, is at least when I think about my life, like that seems to, if I'm going to be here for an undisclosed period of time and then I go back into the void forever, I think it's, okay, what are the possibilities of Bardia? You know, how much potential exists, and how can I continue to express that potential at the highest level at scale to leave this place better than when I found it?
That was beautifully said.
Thanks, man.
Wow. You got multiple mic drops there. So
yeah, kind of a long-winded answer to, you know, what's the difference between ayahuasca and
well, also there was the question of like, what was the most impactful thing that you took away? And so that was, very well said. Very well said. And so, truth, remembering truth, you said, compassion and gratitude, and the graceful essence of ayahuasca.
And a surrendering in a way, you know, I think that was another download. It was like, dude, good.
Yeah.
Like just go with the flow.
Yeah.
You know, like actually one of the most powerful experiences I've ever had was on psilocybin. It was like probably around 4 or 5 grams. And like, I remember I was sitting on this like couch thing, and all of a sudden, like, you know, I kind of like spoke to source, or like called out for it. And I was like, if you're here, show me, you know, bring yourself, you know, I invite you in. My eyes were open, and it felt like this source of energy, just like would seem like a huge like block, just kind of came into the room, this like force field of energy. And as that happened, I remember I was kind of my legs were spread out, and it started from my toes and it kind of came into like my body, and it was like the most powerful source of energy I'd ever felt. And it literally just like, you know, like being, you know, shot into the body of like a god, like just profound energy. And what it, and so in the presence of that, it was so powerful. It was, and its underlying level was like love. It was like the underlying animating intelligence. And all I wanted to do, and this is like what was so crazy for me, is like, you know, I've like been studying different religions and stuff like that since I was like 14, 15. And like, I was like, I don't get on my knees, you know, like religions, like they get on their knees and pray to God. I was like, what the fuck is that about? You know?
Yeah.
But all I wanted to do was get on my knees and just like think it. You know, it was this level of like please allow me, please give me the privilege to serve you. Like that's how powerful it felt. And the download I received was like, you think you're so in control, right? You're always thinking about what you have to do and like, okay, thinking about the future and like, what's the next strategy? What's the next step? Like you're always planning ahead. And it's like, dude, there is a bullet train that is speeding 1 trillion miles an hour. You're just along for the ride. And your consciousness, like your ego is like the last one to the show. So just like surrender, you know? And I really got that. That was another reminder in my ayahuasca experience. It was like, dude, you're good. You're chilling.
Yeah. Yeah, I can relate to a lot of what you've just described. Surrender is a big one. And on the subject of control and how our egos want to control. And I think a big part of that, tapping back into Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you know, we live in a very abundant time where we have, it's pretty, I mean, for the most part, it's pretty accessible to attain those hierarchy of needs. But previously, we as a human species struggled to attain shelter, food, all of that. And so our egos effectively would take certain actions that felt like we were in control to attain those basic survival needs. And something that Julian channeled in one of our meditations on a weekly call, I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks ago. It was pretty, I wrote the whole thing down in my journal, not this one, but another one back at home, because I thought it was so amazing. And he was channeling something. And he was, I mean, within what I wrote and what he said, he was speaking for these divine spirits. One of the sentences that he relayed was, haven't you received enough proof that we are real? And this was for the integration call, actually. It wasn't for one of our, like his program. And in that sequence of what he was channeling, he said, all of the tensions that you hold out of needing to be in control, you don't need to continuously hold those tensions.
Yeah.
You can let those go. Those are unnecessary, superfluous pieces of noise. And I think exactly what he said was like, you can be in control, or at least you can try to be in control because you are a sovereign being, but it's unnecessary noise to try to constantly be contracted to like, I need to do all these things.
Totally.
And what he said was, or what they were saying, these spirit, this higher power, you can be in command. You don't have to be in control, but you can be in command.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. And
That's
that
a
was
subtle difference. I like that.
And that was liberating for me. Because I do find myself trying to be in control, and like I am filled with abundance. I live in a really, I mean, Austin, Texas itself is flourishing with opportunity, whether it's these, like access to various health modalities within all these different facilities, this community, these different individuals that hold wisdom, that hold, you know, this lighter vibration. It seems like there's just so many people that I meet on a day-to-day basis for the past 2 years I've been here. I'm so grateful to be able to encounter these different types of people because community is so important. And so I live in this part of the world that provides me all these amazing ways to flourish and ways to tap into my higher self. But at the same time, there's like a resonance of still trying to maintain control, whether it's finances
Mm.
or like right now I'm stepping into, I'm already doing it, this entrepreneurial path. It does feel a little scary because I've always been in in that structure of a 9 to 5. Right. And then if it's like relationships, romantic relationships, and it's, other friendships and conversations that you have and you think you need to be in control. Um, yeah, it's the medicine shows you how to surrender.
Mm.
And the second night that I had, it was a big, every single night, the lesson that I learned was when you tap into stillness, when you try to just be aligned with your breath and be centered and be present, that's where you receive the fruits of
Mhm.
this medicine much
Mhm.
more
Yeah.
clearly, much more powerfully,
Yeah.
which may not totally make sense for people that haven't done it or experienced it, but like
Yeah.
you do,
Well,
because
it's about clearing the mind,
yeah,
right? Because when you can quiet the mind, then you become open to receive. It's like
mhm,
if your thoughts are just you've got a full cup,
mm,
you can't let anything else in.
those are, yeah, and what you were saying vibrationally too, like that there may have been just like the phrase or the like using our words, right, and saying like everything is vibration. I've heard so many people say that. I've heard Jay say that, you, Julian, many different people on the call. Camilo, that was a big thing. So one of his presentations
Yeah, dude, that
before,
was wild. That was so perfect. So
yes,
money the way he teed that up.
yeah, and I think when just the
Beautiful.
average person that watches that presentation, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but he shows just by the vibrations of like just starting off with an instrument
Hmm.
and then the patterns of planets
Hmm.
and the rotation of planets around the sun,
Yeah.
and how when you look at them over time, they're literally with their rotation forming these like perfect geometric patterns.
Yeah.
Um, and that's a big lesson that I've noticed, and I was expressing with you some of the magical moments I had with Julian and other people on the retreat was the tonality, the vibration of my voice and stepping into my voice. I've actually been able to recognize that on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis of, okay, my throat feels like there's a little bit of a blockage in my throat chakra, and why is that? And Julian mentioned shame and guilt and how that can really, when you have shame or guilt or that dense negative emotions or energy within you, it does block that. And then your voice is, it does like I've actually noticed the uh, difference of my tone of
Mm.
voice. If I
Yeah.
was in this phase in my life where it was just constantly blocked up, I would have maybe a different type of expression.
Mm.
And that's a big thing that I'm integrating is recognizing when I feel that shame or guilt or whatever. I'm like, where did that come from? Why is that permeating? And releasing that. And I think we were mentioning in the sauna how, like, alongside all the things you've just expressed, what you've learned from this retreat, like acceptance and forgiveness. And when I first started my personal development journey, did not involve saunas or ice baths or any types of plant medicines. It was mainly just meditation and journaling. And so journaling, I would psychologically output thought like better thoughts. So it was the beginning of being aware of my thoughts, what it was doing to me internally,
Mm.
and then trying to have more acceptance. And it definitely had an impact on how I felt. Um, but sometimes there is a stuck energy within you that you could probably still release and crystallize and kind of transmute to a higher more loving, energetic feeling, but it may take longer. And what the medicine has provided me, these 2 retreats that I've done, it's a much quicker, abrupt, maybe not even, yeah, I guess abrupt, but also like an in your face kind of like, oh, this is what it feels like to accept and to forgive. And these are what these emotions are actually doing to me. So the second ceremony, I didn't sleep at all the night previously. I literally didn't sleep. It was funny. I took the first cup and Kevin looked at me and he smiled because I told you I met, like, kind of had an interaction with him after the first ceremony. He was like, so did you get any sleep at all? And I was like, I did. I took a nap around 3 p.m.
3 p.m.
And that was it.
Yeah.
So I really did get any sleep. And so he poured me a smaller cup just because it was such a powerful night for me. And it's still, the second night was so powerful, but it was a little calmer, still powerful, but a little bit calmer with how things flowed. And the experience was 4 to 5 hours of just watching my thoughts. And I've been meditating for 5 years and I've been practicing this, right? But what the medicine enhanced was the persistence, or the recognition of what these thoughts and ideas were creating within me. So for instance, like, I had a much more visceral understanding of what these thoughts were translating into emotions. So like envy, anxiety, anger. And it was just this, like, for 4 to 5 hours, constantly seeing, like, this is what envy is doing to your body. This is how it feels. But you could just feel it more impactfully, more viscerally, like, in your face. And you're like, oh, whoa.
Yeah. You become very sensitive to the subtle shifts in energy and vibration.
That's the word, sensitive. Like, you're much more intact and aware of how these emotions are affecting you and how they're affecting others.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really interesting because it's like, well, what is an emotion, right? It's like a cascade of, neurotransmitters and neuropeptides and hormones and, right? And so this almost goes back to that underlying thing, right? When you peel the language of the fabric of language back, you're left with what's the energy, right? And these emotions, man, they carry these different frequencies. So thoughts of anger, thoughts of envy, whatever they might be, right? You can feel the visceral response in your body. You become so much more sensitive to it. So you can see, like, oh, being mindful of how I'm choosing to interpret the data in front of me is so key.
And that has been, what I've been, like I said, there's so much that I and we can integrate. But the biggest thing for me has been to recognize the words that you use, the impact of those words, the tonality of how you're saying it, how it's representing through emotions inside of your body.
Yeah.
And it's not easy, like, on a moment to moment basis, do that. Like, some people, at least at an earlier stage in my life, I think that would have been like, kind of, okay, I have to do this every moment. And because of the patterns that I've accumulated, it was persistent. It was negative a lot throughout every day and many moments of the day. And so to try to recognize that and be aware of that, people might be like, I give up, dude. That's too much.
Yeah, it can be a lot for a lot of people, especially when you have a history of kind of trauma or like
PTSD.
Dysfunctional relationships.
Yeah. Some of these feedback cycles of emotions can be just like, you can get lost. I think if you give yourself enough space and time in the stillness, in solace, by yourself, not doing anything. And I mean it. Like, you don't use your phone and you just go into nature and you sit there for like an hour or even 2 hours and just do nothing. Don't read. There does seem to be this, like, voice within you that can recognize, oh, this is okay. understand that there's truth here. But what I found myself doing is, as men, feeling shame or weak because of emotions that would come up. So it's like I'm feeling negative emotions for authentic suffering, and that's something that Julian and I think I've expressed this on a couple episodes, like chronic suffering versus authentic suffering. And that chronic suffering is just like you're feeling bad for natural emotions that are coming up. That we have feelings, men and women, and there's people in my life that I've seen like, and this is just men throughout time. And I think Chris Williamson on the Modern Wisdom podcast had a conversation with this gentleman talking about this specific thing, and like World War I and II. I mean, when you express those sensitive emotions, it was a sign of weakness when you were in war or when you're in the face of battle, in the face of your enemies. So you had to suppress those at the time for survival, but we're not in the correct, I mean, at least here, me and you are not in battle, at least like actual physical warfare, right?
Yeah.
So it gets to a point where I'm sure, man, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We'll get into your line of what you're doing, your purpose, right? As a coach. A lot of whether it's alcohol, prescription drugs, sugar, whatever it may be, a lot of men and women are overusing those substances, and they're using it and abusing it to suppress those feelings. Like
thoughts and feelings.
And that then just continues into a cycle of unhealthy.
Vicious cycle. And can't escape it.
Now I went through your Instagram to take some notes, and it's like you're sacrificing a lot when you perpetuate all of that. Like you're sacrificing your own physical, biological health
so much,
but also like all the relationships that you have. And we've normalized the aggressive consumption of all these things. We think it's okay to take opioids or different prescription pharmaceutical drugs for these symptoms that we face, but these 1,000-year-old plant medicines are
dangerous,
super dangerous, and like they're also, it's radical to implement that into your life. And Will had a great talk about this on our podcast. Like we've gotten to that stigma, we've gone into that societal condition and filter to think the opposites, it should be the other way around in my view. Right. And like something that Will said was like, what did he say? He said, people have these stigmas of these plant medicines, and we're aware of those stigmas. We're aware of what society thinks. But when we take them, it feels so right. I feel
like
so
you're
much
home.
more. Yeah, I feel like I'm home. I feel like I literally created a video, the first video on Instagram, right after. It's kind of like my own testimonial and what was flown from my heart after this retreat. And I'm actually going to have this gentleman on my podcast next. His name's Dr. Dave.
Oh yeah.
And
love Dr. Dave.
Yeah, he commented on my video. It was like a 2-minute video. He was like, "Welcome home." And I was just like, "Thank you." And all I can say is that, you've got all these stigmas, all this like shame towards these plant medicines. And we're like, "Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. I feel it too. But we're going to do it anyways." And when we do it in the right setting with intention, responsibly, respectfully, it clearly feels right. And there's immense growth in a short period of time. So, I think there's the evolution of the internet and social media, and there's a lot of this like, I've heard the psychedelic renaissance, right? That seems to be kind of coming forth. And so that's great, but there's still a lot of negativity around these topics. And so,
well, they're really misunderstood, right? And the system is structured in such a way where, you know, they're demonized, and, you know, we're conditioned the way we're conditioned, right, through our educational system, the way, you know, the capitalist structure is set up, where, you know, a few large corporations control the distribution of all media platforms, right? And you've got the pharmaceutical industry, and you've got, you know, the health industry, and you've got the food industry, right? So everything is, they've set it up in such a way to keep people consuming, operating at a low vibration, sick, and just stuck in this vicious cycle, right? It's like, again, we were talking about it earlier in the sauna. It's like, it's crazy that, you know, we're 2023 coming into 2024, and we've got all this technology, and obviously the information is out there, but like, if humanity is to change and transform, it starts with parenting and education. It starts with, how do we raise the optimal human being that has an understanding of its operating system, that has an understanding of its consciousness, that has an understanding of its mind, that has an understanding of its brain and its nervous system and the sensations that flow through it, and how to regulate these things and how to manage these things, right? But there's none of that. Like, you just willy-nilly, anybody, you know, you can have kids, you know, no test. I always think like you should have to take a test, you know, show and demonstrate competency, right? You got to take a test to drive a car, but you don't have to demonstrate any level of competency to just pump out other human beings and to bring them, you know, by the millions happening around the world in really kind of crazy, painful like environments. And it's obviously, this is a way bigger question. It's like, okay, well, so you're saying people who just live in poor conditions like can't have kids? Like, that's not fair. No, not necessarily, but like, if we're trying to build a vision of a better future, it's like, we need to come home. We need to come home and recognize that, like, you know, the way the system is currently set up, it's not designed to create a self-aware, critical thinking, creative, sovereign individual. It's designed to build a compliant factory worker who is able to be controlled and easily influenced according to the larger systems at play. You know, and not to say that pharmaceuticals don't have any value, but yeah, it's like, you know, imagine you take what's going on in the Middle East right now and you give everybody a dose of psilocybin. You know, you give everybody, you know, they have to sit through an ayahuasca ceremony before, immediately, right? Like, when you experience plant medicine, the last thing, I'm talking, if there's a list of 1,000,000 things, the last thing on that list is violence. You understand the truth. I am you. You are me. We are mirrors to each other, right? You want peace. You want harmony. You want love. You want connection. You want homeostasis. And yeah, man. I mean, it seems like there's some breakthroughs happening, right? You've got MAPS, and it seems like MDMA therapy might be legalized here pretty soon. And, you know, psilocybin's been legalized in a few states. So slowly but surely, and with the way the world is going, with COVID that happened 3 years ago, and people are starting to wake up and recognize, you know, it's like, yeah, their divide and conquer strategy is working very, very well. You've got hundreds of different ideologies and pockets of people who are just angry and frustrated and pointing fingers, but like, there's also a different level of awareness to recognize, like, hey, this system that we were all bought into, thinking like we've got this loving government that's looking out for us and everything they say is for our benefit and protection and safety, people are beginning to see between the lines and to recognize that. And crazy time we live in, man. Really, really crazy time. I mean, the financial system, we got wars going on, like, whole thing is really wild. Crazy time to be alive, for sure.
Yeah, and that's something I keep going back and forth between Will and Billy. And I think it's Billy. stick with Billy, but that's something that Billy said was, we went to this retreat, we experienced everything but violence.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's
like
just
all
like
the higher vibrations of love and all that. And then you do come back to ordinary life and you see,
it's
you
it's
peer
so
back
insane.
in.
It's such a lower level of consciousness, you know,
To lower
violence, barbarism, tribal, like,
this war with Palestine. I'm seeing stuff in the United States. It's like, didn't we learn about this in World War II with Nazi Germany? And it's like already
it's so
picking back up
complicated,
again.
dude.
Yeah.
So complicated. And like, you know, the reason wars, I mean, there's so many reasons, but like, you know, when war is enacted on like a group of people and there's just devastation and destruction across the board, across huge sects of like the population, the pain and the anger and the frustration in those people, right? The desire for revenge, for needless suffering and killing and just absolute like destruction, you know, it perpetuates.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope that we learn within our lifetimes to step away from war and to find other ways of, I mean, you brought up the word harmony, and that word doesn't get brought up enough in my, purview as well. And it did come up a few times. It came up more so after my first ever ayahuasca retreat. And, yeah, like that's what I pray for in the world, is for more harmony. And, we've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
But so you've noted a few times that, like right in the very beginning of our conversation, you were saying how like we were talking about the releasing of energy and how you can take on other people's. And so I'd love for you to introduce what you do, and to hear about your background. You did mention your father, and you mentioned that, I think you're pretty public about your journey with drinking. And just to provide a very brief, piece of information within my life. My grandfather on my father's side was an alcoholic, never met him, was abusive to my family. I didn't meet him, but he was abusive to family members. And yeah, he was a pretty big alcoholic. And then, outside of even my own family, like maybe family friends or friends, I mean, it's just so prevalent, like going into college too. Like I started drinking around the same age as you, 14, 15 years old. And that perpetuated and continued until, I moved here 2 years ago, and I was beginning to slow it down. I'm now over 9 months, no alcohol.
Let's
It's
go.
pretty
Good work,
nice.
man.
It's been it's been a surprisingly pretty easy process for me.
Good for you.
Very naturally, organically happened. But it's a sensitive topic for me because there's people that I care about, whether it's friends, whether it's family, that, people that I love and that are they've treated me with respect, and they've always been, for the most part, very loving. But I do see certain moments where alcohol can kind of be a drain, to our higher self, to our optimal self. And so, there wasn't really a declaration for me to stop. It just kind of was in preparation for my first ayahuasca experience. And then I just kind of carried from there. And the community here at Squatch in Austin, it's been just so easy just to not drink. And I haven't made, like I said, I haven't made a declaration. This is a lifelong thing, but more and more, it feels like it could be. And I don't really feel any cravings to do it again. And, but yeah, I've definitely seen, especially during COVID and after, the even more consumption of alcohol, um, and what it does to people. And there are moments where, yeah, there's outbursts. It can be, throughout the year, you can drink 200 to 300 times. And out of those times, there could be like 3 or 4 moments where it's like really traumatic. So yeah, I would love to hear about your story if you feel called to share your relationship and journey with alcohol and like what you're doing now. Yeah, wherever you feel in your life to start.
Yeah, man. So alcohol really, I mean, has been kind of like really goes all the way back to like my childhood. So was yeah, just kind of grew up in a pretty crazy kind of dysfunctional family across the board. And my dad drank every day.
Mm.
Only time I really knew him sober was like Saturday morning, once a month. He'd take me, get my hair cut and stuff like that. But he was drinking all the time. And so yeah, there's just all types of kind of crazy dysfunction, what felt like emotional neglect and all types of stuff. Mom tried committing suicide at one point. Just a ton of craziness. And so, when I was 14, so like at 12, like my family kind of split apart, and then everybody like moved like separate ways and stuff. I moved in with my sister for a little bit. And then in high school, freshman year, I was 14. Dad, get some news from my sister. Dad's dead, died of alcohol poisoning in his sleep. And yeah, man, that was kind of crazy. And so, growing up in a really kind of crazy family, in the beginning, I was like, I'm never going to do drugs. I've seen what it does. Oldest sister, really struggled with addiction, still does. And, but inevitably get into high school, start partying around freshman, sophomore year, and I started drinking. And pretty much the first time I picked up alcohol, I became a binge drinker. I was never the type, like the way alcohol interacts with my brain chemistry and system is like cocaine for me. So like as soon as I have one, switch goes off and I'm drinking until I'm either thrown up or super drunk. And so, yeah, man, it became a binge drinker. And so when my dad passed away, my uncle came down to help with the funeral. And he gave me this book. My uncle was like this, he was super into like spirituality and stuff. He gave me this book by Wayne Dyer. If you've heard of Wayne Dyer, spiritual guru, died a few years ago. And the book was called You'll See It When You Believe It. And I read that book right at that kind of critical period in my life. And that book introduces you to the concept of, consciousness and how your thoughts influence your reality and your beliefs influence your reality. And just like, I read that at 14 years old and it completely shifted my paradigm because I never even knew that dimension of life existed. Had no thoughts of like self-awareness and a little bit, but like, so that sent me down this rabbit hole of like becoming fascinated with like personal development and, spirituality and science and philosophy and all these different things. And like I had read like all the major personal development books by the time I was 18 or 19, got really into Alan Watts and Terrence McKenna and Robert Anton Wilson and just all these different like philosophies and things like that. And so, but this whole time I was also drinking, right? And so I say this in my podcast all the time. It's like half of me was just obsessed with alcohol. Like it was the best thing I'd ever found, But then the other half of me was really oriented around personal growth and becoming a better version of myself and somehow, some way becoming successful one day and really like fulfilling my potential. That was something my dad always used to tell me. If there's one blessed gift I mean, multiple blessed gifts. Now, when I look back on my family life and the pain and the trauma and the loss, like it was divinely planned and orchestrated. It was the perfect syllabus to turn me into the person that I am today. And I love who I am today. And I'm so grateful to be in the position that I'm in, making the impact that I'm making. But it was all perfect. But one of the pieces of gold that came from, didn't really have a relationship, I mean, with him, I mean, whatever you would call that. But he would always just say, you have so much potential. And so that was like this lingering program in the back of my mind. I'm like, okay, I got to explore potential. What does that mean? And so, throughout my drinking career, like I was a hardcore weekend binge drinker. Friday, Saturday, Sunday would get absolutely obliterated. 3-4 day hangover, start feeling better Friday, do it all over again. And it felt like I was reliving the same week of my life over and over and over again, despite being high functioning and making progress. And I was entrepreneurial. And on the outside, I mean, what people do in their 20s is they go out and drink and party and get fucked up, right? So on the outside, probably, some people have been like, yeah, Bardia likes to drink, he likes to go hard. But like, I was always pretty responsible too. I wasn't like, so yeah, man, through my 20s, like really continued that personal development journey, but like couldn't fucking kick the alcohol, and I tried so many times. I went to AA, hired a therapist for a little while. I did everything. Longest I went was 6 months, and then I had to drink again, right back into the cycle. And then once the pandemic hit, I was locked away at home. I had some money in the bank. And so I was like, oh, it's chill. Like I just started drinking. And so went from weekend binge drinking to pretty much drinking every day. And as soon as I started drinking every day, the volume started to rapidly increase. And so really at my worst, I got up to drinking like 4 to 6 bottles of wine a day, which is like 20 to 30 glasses of wine a day. And, or like I'd polish off, 750 milliliter of like Tito's and have some wine or beers. Smoking half a pack to a pack a day as well. Closer to a pack a day at its worst. And so, yeah, man, ran that for about 6 months and it just wasn't working. Everything was breaking down mentally, emotionally, physically. My body hurt. Like everything was just shutting down. I mean, that's like a slow suicide at that point. And then pretty much got to a place where I hit a rock bottom. And what that was for me was, one day a buddy of mine invited me out to the pool and he challenged me to a race. And I've never, ever lost a swimming race against anybody. Like I'm just the fastest swimmer. I don't care who you are. Like I've just always won. And he was like dead set. He's like, I'm for sure going to be. I was like, there's no way. So like, ego starts getting involved. Yeah. At that day I was drinking, and previous 6 months of that, my body was just broken. And so in high school, I had dislocated my left shoulder playing football. And I guess it was still kind of weak, or it was even more weak and breaking down because of all the alcohol I was drinking and not really working out. And so, yeah, he challenged me to a race. We start racing and I'm doing this stroke. I forgot whatever, freestyle or whatever, and swimming super aggressively. I'm talking like, running away from a saber-toothed tiger speed. And about 70, 80% as I'm about to like get to the finish line, and I was ahead of him too. My left shoulder like dislocates and like rips out of its socket and was just mangled and hanging there. Oh, God. And it was the most excruciating pain in my life. Never felt more pain than that in any capacity. And so I'm like under the water, my shit's just fucked and I can't get up. Like the buoyancy and the softness of the water is like, keeping it whatever. And just like in that moment, just life kind of flashed before my eyes. I was 29 at the time. And what I did is I equated alcohol to pain in that moment. I was like, this is because of alcohol. And
were you drunk during this moment?
I can't remember if I wasn't like hammered, but I probably had 5, 6, 7 drinks in me, And so one of the things I talk about on my podcast all the time, and so I'm a sobriety coach. I help people quit drinking alcohol. And one of the things I tell everybody is that, hey, if you're going to embark on this journey and you got to get clear on the pain, because when we're in active addiction or, we have alcohol use disorder, whatever you want to call it, a problematic relationship with alcohol, we're constantly like the brain defaults to rationalizing your relationship to it, and it doesn't focus on the pain. Like, yeah, you feel shitty the next day and you shame and guilt and hangover and, you check your phone and all these different things. But as soon as you start feeling better, you forget about all that and you go back to the alcohol, you go back to the drug, right? Which keeps people in this constant cycle. It's this pain pleasure cycle, and the neurochemistry in our brain, it goes deep. But in that moment, I was like, okay, alcohol equals pain. Like the reason I'm feeling this pain is because of alcohol. Because if I was sober, like I wouldn't have put myself in this position. I wouldn't have been swimming like an idiot like that, so aggressively. And so I reflected on the last like 6 months of my life and where my life was going. And I was 29 at the time. I was a few months away from turning 30. And I played the tape forward. And I've got a podcast episode called Play the Tape Forward, which has helped a lot of people. And I was like, okay, like what I recognize in that moment is I am nowhere near the man I know I'm capable of being, and I'm nowhere near the version of myself I thought I would be at 30 years old, right? When we're young in our 20s, we're like, okay, at 30, I'm going to be here. This life, these finances, like this career, this like whatever that thing is, right? We set these kind of goals or visions. It's like, I'm a fucking multiverse and a half away because I have this standard for who I can be. And I'm like, the way you're operating now is nowhere near that. And so I played the tape forward and I was like, or I rewinded the tape and I played it forward. I was like, okay, in my 20s, I tried every possible which way to quit. I tried to moderate. I tried to manage. I tried to switch from this to only, like I set 4.5 million rules. None of them work. And when left to my own devices, this is the result. And so I thought about like playing the tape forward into my 30s. And I'm like, if I want to become the version of myself that I know I'm capable of being, I can't do it with alcohol. There's just no way. Like I already tried. And for me to think that I can after this, I'm just spitting on my own grave, basically, And so, yeah, man, in that moment, I made what seemed like the hardest decision of my life. The biggest sacrifice, the most ultimate sacrifice. I don't know anybody on earth that loved alcohol as much as me, just a fiend for it, but hated it at the same time. But just the rush, the dopamine, the euphoria, the feeling, the disconnection. And so in that moment, I made that decision. And shortly after, I got this opportunity to work with this coaching company, and I started working with them remote. And, they're like, hey, we're building this office out in Austin. Why don't you come work for us? They flew me out, saw Austin for the first time.
So wake up wealthy.
Yeah.
Nice.
And, at first I was like, I like the remote work. I don't want to be in an office again. But, once I came out and saw the city, I'd never lived anywhere outside of Orange County. And like, you know what? I think this will be a good move. I'm getting sober. I've got this really good, like kind of work opportunity with this network of people who I think can be really good for me. And, I can go out to Austin and start a new life. And yeah, man, moved out to Austin. So I got sober in August of, I think, 2020, moved out February of 2021. And yeah, man, worked with Wake Up Wealthy for about 18 months. And it was a profound, beautiful experience, a profound healing journey. Became a coach within Wake Up Wealthy, coached a bunch of guys and coached Evolve retreats, and really kind of got my footing in that world, in that space, learned a lot, studied and learned from Julian. And then really got this feeling of like, I need autonomy, like I'm capped here. I'm not growing the way that I want to. And so left them. And a few months later, I got on TikTok. And really organically, at first, I was posting content around personal development and mindset. I was like, maybe I should build a personal brand. Who knows? Like, let's see where this goes. And then I started posting about sobriety, and the content just like took off and followed the views. And yeah, man, stopped drinking coach within a couple months, like took on my first client. And it's been little over 18 months now. And yeah, man, it's been a wild journey. I've got a podcast with almost 300,000 downloads, and
wow.
gotten people messaging me from every country all over the world. I've worked with hundreds of people personally, helped thousands of people quit drinking through just my content and the way I communicate and articulate the whole journey. And yeah, man, it's been wild. I feel very, very fortunate and blessed and grateful. When I look back on my life, because I've been trying to wrap my mind around consciousness and the nature of reality in my mind and my experiences and my interpretations and the whole deal, my family life and why this and why me and everything, like it all worked out in such a way to lead me to be doing what I'm doing today. There's so much alignment. Everything that worked out, everything that didn't work out, all in perfect order, all in perfect divine timing. Every job I had, every relationship I had, every career, every business that I started, every tiny little thing, every skill I built was like, oh, so you can finally do this, And so that goes back to that level of like surrender and trust, like knowing, okay, if you look back and everything was orchestrated perfectly for all the work that you put in and all the times you were lazy and procrastinated and it just wasn't timing for that thing to unfold or for you to put that action in or whatever, it's like, trust that moving forward, it'll unfold that way too. And so, in times of like uncertainty, I'm like, okay, well, if something's not popping off right now or like whatever it is, it's like, that's okay. It will, and to just trust that process. And it always does, right? A week later, 2 days later, surprise gift from the universe.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, man.
Yeah. So you stopped drinking as you moved to Austin and went to Wake Up Wealthy.
Yeah. I mean, that was the last day I drank in that pool.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. That was the last day I drank.
Oh, wow. It's a big
I was like, I can't do it.
Yeah.
I was like, if I start drinking and I do the Wake Up Wealthy thing, like it's going to ruin that. And that was a really valuable thing for me. I was like, I'm not going to throw this away.
One of the things that I noted here, something that I faced when I was still drinking and, I kind of felt the same way. I was like mostly responsible. I definitely had some moments in life where it was not. But out of the length of my life in which I drink, there's only a couple moments or maybe a handful. But a big thing that made it difficult to make a big change, a shift, was the social aspect.
That's a tough part for many of us.
I was going to say I could place a bet that that's probably a big one for all your clients.
Yeah, for everyone, man. I mean, alcohol is the social lubricant,
right?
It's like, and if your life is the way you define fun and connection with other people involves going to a location and drinking together, right? A lot of people recognize or come to the conclusion eventually, I mean, if they fall into kind of drinking culture, is that like most of their friendships don't have as much depth as they think once you remove the alcohol.
Yeah.
It's the alcohol that brings them together. And if you remove the alcohol, all of a sudden, they feel like they can't connect with those people. They don't, the fabric and the quality of the conversation is much different. They themselves, because they discover and rely on alcohol from, their teens and into their 20s, have underdeveloped levels of confidence and self-esteem without alcohol, their ability to communicate and articulate and socialize and to feel comfortable in a social setting, right? There's underlying levels of social anxiety, right? And then you tack on trauma from the past. It's like, I say it all the time. It's like, we're not quitting drinking. We're learning how to live alcohol free. And that's a learning process, right? If you've been living with alcohol for 15 years or longer, and it's been there in every instance, on every vacation, every weekend, every evening, every birthday, every baby shower, every wedding, every, you go paddleboarding, you drink, you go to the arcade, you drink, you go to the movies, you have a drink, you go to dinner, you have a drink, you go on a date, you have a drink, right? It's like, and what people don't realize about alcohol is that it is incredibly addictive. there's this whole misunderstanding of alcohol. The alcohol secretes so much dopamine in the brain, 4x above baseline, right? And like there is no like you get out unscathed from alcohol. Everybody can become addicted, even if you're currently not exhibiting signs of alcoholism or alcohol use disorder. You know, because you're tapping the reward center, and anything that produces such a high level of dopamine is by nature self-reinforcing, and you're messing with the sensitive balance of neurochemistry. I mean, a reasonable number of my clients come to me after not having a problematic relationship with alcohol in their 20s or 30s or even 40s, but develop a problematic relationship in their 50s. So a lot of people who think that they're using it moderately and aren't quote unquote on the spectrum of alcohol use disorder. In fact, I would say a much, much larger percentage of people who drink are on the spectrum of alcohol use disorder, but don't recognize it and don't have the self-awareness around it, and are also subtly in denial around it, right? If you can't just have one or two and stop and then not drink for 6 months and not think about it or want it or crave it or look forward to it, like that's a normal relationship. Anything more than that, where you're like continually turning towards alcohol as part of like your routine, likely, right? Unless it's just that one maximum, like sort of two, where it's not really affecting mindset, behavior, consequences down the line, energy, brain fog, you know, things like that. Probably somewhere on the spectrum.
Something that really was flabbergasting to witness in one of your, it was like 2 videos. You talk about the relationship between dopamine and alcohol, and then also like observing a healthy brain, one brain with Alzheimer's and the other that's pretty long-term alcoholic. And I mean, the long-term alcoholic brain, it's crazy
Yeah, it looks
how
scary.
worse it looks in the Alzheimer's brain.
Yeah.
And I think when you explain, I would love for you to explain what is going on with baseline dopamine levels. Because yeah, it does seem like there is a flush of dopamine that runs. I had the same relationship with alcohol too. It was like, dude, it felt so good too. I remember the first time I really drank, it felt so physically pleasurable, and I was like, oh, this is fantastic.
Yeah,
I was 13, you know, like, and then for the rest of your life, you're chasing that pleasurable feeling, and you're, you know, tying that pleasurable feeling with the social friend,
all those
group,
memories, just stacking them.
Yeah, and I mean, don't get me wrong. There's been some really amazing moments with friends where we're having drinks, and it's not like super
totally,
you know, unhealthy or aggressive, but there are
some of the best memories drinking for sure.
Yeah,
it's a drug.
Yeah,
you know, it floods the brain with the things that we're all trying to work for with a sober mind and organically as human beings. Right? As human beings, we're driven by neurochemistry. Everything we do is in the pursuit of dopamine and serotonin or GABA or oxytocin or adrenaline. Right? So everything we do is determined and modulated by the secretion of these neurotransmitters. And so it's like the old saying, it's like, yeah, drugs are fun. You know, it's like you're hacking the system, but there's no free lunch in nature, right? And everything, you know, everything that goes up must come down. And when you start hacking the system, the down part comes with a tremendous amount of interest that you have to pay back. And that is what creates a cycle of addiction. And the vicious cycle is that, you know, you have to earn the serotonin. You have to earn the oxytocin. You have to earn the dopamine. And when you try to hack it, it creates a very, very painful and vicious cycle that will destroy everything that you love over time. So understanding dopamine. So I watched this neuroscience video where this guy breaks it down. And so this explanation is from this video. And so on average, the brain has about 50 nanograms per deciliter of dopamine. And I don't really understand the technical breakdown of that, but this is what he says. And so when you think about dopamine, he's like, dopamine is tied to reward and motivation and movement and kind of feelings of pleasure. And so you said about 50 nanograms per deciliter. Now, if you went to work one day, Shane, and you walk in and they're like, Shane, economy's kind of crazy. We're going to have to cut some things back. And I hate to say it, but we have to let you go. Imagine how disheartened you would feel. Fucking just bummed, right? That would drop your dopamine from 50 to about 40. So you're losing about 10 points there.
Okay.
Now, he goes on to say that if you're clinically depressed, like you can't get out of bed, like you can't lift your pillow, you don't have the motivation to even go to the bathroom and take a shower, take a piss, right? Like that's how just stuck you are. Your dopamine's at a 10. Okay. Now on the flip side, he says when you're eating your favorite food or having a bunch of like sugar, maybe, or having sex, your dopamine goes from 50 to about 90 to 100. So it doubles. Okay. So life, what normal everyday life affords us is about like a doubling of our baseline dopamine. Now, when you drink alcohol, it increases dopamine to 190 to 200.
Whoa.
So it's giving this totally abnormal flood of the reward center. Wow. It's like your brain is jackpotting. Quite literally jackpotting. Because think sex. Think how great like sex is. And then think like, like eating like just fucking bomb-us like warm pizza that just came out of the oven, right? It's like that, it's really good.
Yeah.
Alcohol's doubling that. So like consciously you might not be aware of this, but the signaling of your brain recognizes this. And so anything that produces dopamine is biologically self-reinforcing because these reward signals would only be produced in response to things that were good for our evolution, right? So dopamine, like he starts the video off by saying the most important things in the world are food, water, and dopamine. Without dopamine, like we wouldn't be here as human beings, right? So dopamine is secreted when we do things that are good for us, like making forward progress towards goals, acquiring resources, finding a mate, having sex, eating food, finding a patch of berries, finding an apple tree, right? Like, bonding, right? So things that would be good for our survival. Alcohol comes in, and I call alcohol the modern day Trojan horse. It comes in and it hijacks the system, and it's flooding our brain with this reward, and so it's jacking up our dopamine, but the brain's always trying to maintain homeostasis. It's trying to maintain a level balance. And it's like this teeter-totter effect. And you can learn more about this by looking into Dr. Anna Lemke's work and reading the book Dopamine Nation. It's great on audio.
I've heard of that book, yeah.
And so the way she explains it is like, your brain gets jacked up, flooded with dopamine, and you go into this pleasure state. And so everything in life oscillates between pain and pleasure. These are the two fundamental drivers of all human experience. At the deepest subconscious level, everything we do is filtered through, is this going to get me closer to pleasure, or is this going to move me further away from pain? So everything, getting up to go to the fridge, sitting down and going to work, brushing our teeth, every basic thing that you could possibly fathom at the deepest unconscious levels being filtered through the pursuit of pleasure and the avoidance of pain. So you get flooded with pleasure, but it's not so. And so when the alcohol starts to wear off, it's not going to just bring you back down to like 50. It's going to tip you now to like 40. So that's why the next day you feel unmotivated. Yeah. All you want to do is sit around, watch Netflix. You're skipping the hike. You're skipping the gym. You feel like shit, right? And so you're depressed and you're less motivated. Now, when you go in and you flood the brain's like receptor sites, it damages your dopamine receptor sites. And so now, the 40's coming back up over the next couple of days. Over time, with repeated exposure to alcohol or any drug or porn or gambling or even sex, like whatever it is, your brain's not going to come up to 50. That baseline is going to start to drop. So you go from 50, And then, a year later, you're just always at 49 now. And then 5 years later, you're at 45. And, by the time you're in your 30s and you've been on this weekend warrior train, your baseline level of dopamine is like at a 40 maybe. And I don't know if these numbers technically are correct, but this is the conceptual concept is that, your brain, when it doesn't have the drug, its baseline gets lower and lower and lower. And so now it gets to the point where when you don't have the drug, there's this background noise of like dissatisfaction or unfulfillment or boredom, or like nothing seems that fun or interesting or exciting, and you don't feel that motivated to do it unless it involves alcohol. And this is where, alcohol use disorder and alcoholism really begins to take effect is when you need the substance or the behavior just to feel okay, because the baseline is no longer okay. It's tipped to the side of pain.
Yeah. Whew. Wow. And so for people that start to abstain, I've heard something along the lines of it can take like 6 months to 12 months for your brain to really adapt.
Everybody's different, man. It takes about 30 days, according to Dr. Anna Lemke's work, for like kind of baseline levels to kind of come back. But complete recovery could take 2 to 3 years. And depending on who you are, how much you've been consuming and how long you've been using, there may never be full recovery. Like what people don't understand is that alcohol is a drug, just like heroin or cocaine. And people have this assumption that, because it's legal and it's in every movie, song, TV show, every hero does it, every celebrity does it. And we've been conditioned since birth. Our parents do it. It's woven in so deeply, right? that it's approved. It must be okay. There's no critical thought, and there's no space for critical thought because we get groomed into it in high school and college, right? It's just what everybody does. But it's like, imagine remove alcohol and put in cocaine, right? Imagine instead everybody every weekend was going out and just doing lines in the bars, right? And when you go to get sober, it's like, imagine you were doing cocaine for 15 years. And a lot of people, myself included and everybody else, it's like when we get sober, there is a period, oftentimes that first year, of fucking boredom, of a lack of mental or emotional regulation, just like, what the fuck am I doing? Feeling like you're missing out, like all these things. Yeah, man, it takes time to recover.
I can definitely resonate with that. I definitely think that that has happened to me.
But staying proactive is the key. That's my whole model of recovery, which is really different from anything else that exists out there, is that like, excuse me, AA and all these different things. It's like, there's no talk about proactivity. You got to go to war. You got to go to war with optimizing mind, body, spirit, and neurochemistry post drug abuse.
Yeah. So technically, I waned off of it midway through 29, or maybe even a little, almost 30 years old. And as I was doing that, I was like, for the past 3 or 4 years, especially when I moved to Austin, I was very proactive. I was on the Peloton bike, I was running, I was reading almost every single day. I was trying to eat better. I was taking vitamins and minerals, and then coming to Texas, the cold plunge and the community and these different retreat experiences where you have these like wholesome conversations with communities. So I was doing all of this, all together, and before I even really stopped for real. So that's probably why it was like easier for me.
Yeah, those things make such a big difference.
Yeah.
Quit putting the bottle down and making no other changes to your life it's probably hard. Is not the answer.
Yeah.
And that's what everybody thinks. Like when you develop this problematic relationship, you're like, it's the alcohol that's the problem. If I just figure out how to put this bottle down, everything's going to get better. And it's like, no, alcohol is the symptom. It's the tip of the iceberg. right? There's a reason you're turning to alcohol in the first place, and that just comes down to psychological and emotional dysregulation. There's missing pieces, things that are unaddressed, things that you haven't developed the courage to be fully present to and to work through and face. And having that community and taking all of those proactive measures when you put the bottle down is the key. Is the key.
Yeah. And a pretty staggering statistic that I saw in one of your videos was that it showed over the years alcohol, opioids, cocaine, fentanyl. And fentanyl has gone above, like, I think fentanyl was number 2 or 3. I think it was like alcohol is way above all of them.
Yeah.
And then it's opioids. And then it was cocaine. And then eventually now it's fentanyl, because fentanyl is just this, super potent drug that you only need a little bit of it and you could die. And, but just to see that gap in alcohol and everything else, I was like, holy shit, dude. Like that many people are dying in comparison to all these other drugs.
Well, it's partly because more people use alcohol. Right. So you got to take that into context. But even then it's like when, there's several research studies and stuff. If you just Google like ranking of worst drugs, alcohol is always at the top, over even crack and methamphetamines and heroin. And the way it shows you this bar graph kind of going down this way, the most of the top, alcohol is always at the top, and it measures it by harm to society and harm to user or self. And so alcohol by and large has the most harm to society. Like it severely outweighs the other ones because of just the sheer volume of people who use it. And then you think, when somebody is drinking alcohol or has any level of like a problematic relationship with it, it's causing immediate harm to their social circle, specifically their family. Yeah. Right. And then you take all the lost productivity to society and work and car accidents and, health problems that come from it. It's terrible. The consequences of alcohol far outweigh its benefits.
Yeah, and I saw an individual commenting on one of your posts. She was talking about, because the post was related to the dopamine levels and speaking to dopamine, and she was explaining her situation, saying like, I can't get back. I've been trying all these different things. Like she quit alcohol, taking supplements, exercising, and then I think you responded explaining ice plunges.
Yeah, so cold exposure.
We just did one session, and I've been doing them for the past year. I've probably done at least 100, I think. And though it is very uncomfortable, it's pretty miraculous how it can help with that dopamine production. And so for people that are at that baseline that's really, really low, and there's like really it's hard for them to kind of get back up. Ice plunges seem to be is it the most effective or one of the more effective ones?
I think exercise and cold exposure are the two. Yeah. Like absolute non-negotiable is if you're recovering from any sort of drug or addictive behavior, even if it's porn, your dopamine's going to be totally shot. Yeah. Cold showers is an absolute non-negotiable if you can get into an ice bath. And then, exercise.
Yeah. And I feel like I'm going to be doing ice plunges for the rest of my life.
Yeah, they're so good.
Yeah. Yeah, man. This is, it's funny. I usually put what I want to cover here, and lately I haven't even been turning to this. It's just all up in the noggin.
Yeah, good.
We've got a little bit of time left because
what are we at?
We're at 2:00, which is technically the end, but we started
a little late. Yeah.
So now that you're on this journey, I mean, it seems like it's been like 18 months that you've been fully into the
Stop Drinking Coach.
Yep.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're really honing in, or it looks like you're honing in on social media, and you've got 15 to 30 calls per week. You're taking on these new clients, and like, where do you see yourself evolving? Do you think you're just gonna be doing this for?
Yeah, good question, man. I see myself doing this for the foreseeable future. I would say over the next like 3 to
I mean,
at least for the next 2 to 5 years.
I was gonna say you could do this probably for the rest of your life because at
Oh,
the
I
rate
for
at
sure
which
could.
Americans and just the rest of the world.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, the vision that I have is ultimately to build this company and then to
Yeah.
exit. I feel like with the unique like sets of knowledge that I have and just the experience of going through this. I mean, if you listen to my podcast, it's just different from anything else out there. There's probably, I don't know. I don't even look. I don't listen to other people's sober podcasts, but there's like 30, 40 of them out there.
Okay.
But mine, every single person, I mean, that comments on social media, sends me emails, sends me private messages, mine is different in the way that I communicate about this journey. Everybody talks about like alcohol. I don't talk about alcohol. I mean, I do, but it carries a different thread, you know? So yeah, I mean, I could certainly do this for a long time, but I think the goal is to build out a program and a system and a model that has a higher like success rate than anything else out there. And then you know, to eventually maybe sell the company, and then from there take those resources and really dig deeper into things like consciousness and human potential, and then to use those funds to like a combination between like probably philanthropy and education.
Cool. It's really cool. Yeah, I was thinking, would it just be a solo person company, like just it's you, right? But it sounds like you'd create this program, this company that could have a multitude of coaches.
Yeah, so everything's been one-on-one up until this point. The start of the new year, I'm going to move towards group coaching.
Nice.
It'll probably be hybrid, but yeah, as I move into group coaching and kind of scale out the community, we'll bring on co-coaches and different experts, and really dial in a system of streamlined support for people. Really take people through a journey at the deepest levels with everything they need. You know, a lot of the programs out there and things I've seen, like they're so fragmented, but like my model is, let me wipe your software clean around everything you ever knew about yourself and reality, and let me rebuild it from scratch with the most elite operating system, with the most elite mental, emotional, and strategic frameworks for managing this desktop interface that you call I'm a human.
I love that. I love, I've heard Naval Ravikant speak to the human brain and our perceptions, and it's like an OS, obviously our bodies are the hardware and whatnot. And so that's really
human
cool.
Operating system is I say that at least 5 to 10 times in each of my podcasts.
Yeah. And we kind of mentioned it through this conversation, but in the sauna too, how we've just created these super complex, highly technological innovations, but we don't really know how to create a streamlined, really well-built human operating system that helps with the most flourishing, harmonious, emotional and mental and spiritual. And I mean, everybody's unique, everybody's individual, but I think that if you follow these protocols of taking care of your body and ice plunge, sauna, all these different things, and then certain perceptions and books and whatnot, like you got a high probability of flourishing and being healthy. So
yeah, developing sovereignty, man. And it's like, well, why are we doing all these things?
Yeah,
to expand consciousness, right? And to like push humanity forward. Like thinking about like the light of consciousness as a collective, right? I feel like, as like silly as it sounds, it's like I feel like I was shot from some other dimension or hyperspace into this sphere of consciousness, and
Mhm.
I'm a node that's trying to like remind other people,
Yeah.
like, hey, like if we want this collective consciousness to evolve to its highest degree, we have to evolve out of alcohol. We have to evolve out of our addictions.
Yeah.
This is a natural progression of the psycho-spiritual journey that we are on as human beings.
Yeah, an interesting thought experiment. 1,000 years from now, do you think any of us will be drinking alcohol? Maybe even more than that, but
1,000 years from now, if we don't blow ourselves up and we assume the same rate of technological growth,
yeah,
I don't know, man.
who knows?
Maybe. I think with you know, the rate medicine and you know, if we assume that we have the access to it, like, I don't know, man. It's hard to say.
Yeah.
But maybe we'll be able to like turn drugs on and off with no residual downstream consequence. Like, so you could flood dopamine and like experience what it would be like to be drunk for an evening, but then you could take a pill or like you push some button on you and it's like no hangover.
Get those baselines back.
You know?
Up.
Yeah. That would be wild.
Yeah.
You know?
Shit, man.
Who knows, man?
Well, listen, you're doing God's work. And as I stated too, man, I mean, we can definitely off the mic talk about my journey too. I mean, it's been a big part. Like alcohol has been the drug of choice for me and for certain people in my life. So this is a very helpful podcast, selfishly, but I think for millions of people around the country and the world, you know, I think there's the relationship with alcohol is kind of evolved to be a little bit overly aggressive. And so what you're building, what you're doing, the energy you're putting out there is it's healing. It's healing people. So thank you for doing what you're doing. Thank you for your time. As we conclude, if you want to shout out where people can find you, and if you have any like concluding messages you'd like to put out there, feel free to. This is your opportunity.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, brother.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Yeah, man. So my brand is the Stop Drinking Coach. So if you Google Stop Drinking Coach, you'll find me. My podcast is called The Stop Drinking Coach. It's on Spotify, Apple, I don't know, a couple other spots. TikTok has 300 plus short form video contents, you know, anywhere from a minute to 2 or 3 minutes long. It's got like 300 little snippets on there at Stop Drinking Coach. Instagram is at The Stop Drinking Coach. And website is www.thestopdrinkingcoach.com. So
cool.
Should be able to find me.
Sweet.
I'm the guy.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, thank
All
you.
right.
Cool.
Peace.